to Johannesburg, and it's past 1 a.m. in the morning. I've been like in the airport or on a plane or I don't know, just moving around for about like over 12 hours right now. But it makes sense. I've traveled like half the length of the African continent today. But look at this. I'm just like, I feel like I just opened the door, turned on the light, and I'm like, wait, am I back home now in Seattle? Everything is just exactly where I want it to be. It looks exactly how I'd want it to look. I just feel like I'm just like, in South Lake Union or I don't know, something, Pentagon City or Arlington or something like that right now. It just feels so much like home, so much like home right now. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I only have this place for about a couple nights because I'm only staying in Johannesburg for like 2-3 days, and then I'm going to head to Cape Town. But for now, I'm just going to enjoy it. I'm going to enjoy this brief respite from my travels and feel like I'm back at home while still enjoying everything that Johannesburg has to offer. But yeah, I'm just going to take a little breath right now. And I'll see you in the morning. Good morning from Johannesburg, from the Melville area of Johannesburg. Right after I spoke to you last night, it's funny because the electricity went out, and even up until now, the electricity is gone. It did come back early in the morning for a little bit, and now it's back out this morning. I know I was warned about the load shedding, as they call it, process just to conserve power because the system here just cannot handle all the demand for electricity from the city. And so there are planned slots of time in which different neighborhoods are without power. So I was just thinking about, right after I said that I felt so at home here, the power went out, and I was just thinking, it doesn't matter if you have all the stuff. If you don't have the infrastructure, you can't use any of it. Like, I can't charge my electronics, I can't use the stove, I can't boil some hot water for some coffee this morning. And in that case, ironically, it might be better being in Gambia, where we're staying with no electricity, and but there was always going to be a battery there for you to charge your stuff, boil water, get stuff done. And a second later, the power comes back. Okay, now that the power is back, I can strategize on finding a SIM card so I don't have to wait around in case the electricity goes out and there's no Wi-Fi. I can get ready for breakfast, make some instant coffee here, which is provided at the Airbnb, and then I can also find a spot to go out for breakfast and do some research on what exactly we're going to do today. So with that, let's head out. And so officially, since I've left the Airbnb, welcome to Nonstop Nikhil's 6th country. I am here in the SOWETO area of Johannesburg. If there's anything you've heard about Johannesburg, it's probably about the SOWETO area. It has a bit of a bad reputation, so we're going to try to take a look at that neighborhood today, learn a bit more about the struggle against apartheid here in South Africa, and just also try to get a bit more of a clear image as to what South Africa is all about, since it's particularly a country that I don't know a lot about, and that's why I'm here. So before we do that, what exactly happened this morning? I walked through the neighborhood that I'm staying in called Melville, to a mall where I figured I could get my SIM card, get something to eat, everything all in one-stop shop. And that's typically what I gather happens here, is that there aren't a lot of like shops that are out open on the street. There aren't a lot of like restaurants that are out open on the street. Rather, everything is sort of encapsulated in a shopping center or a mall. And that's for security reasons. And security is going to be something that immediately slaps you in the face when you arrive here in Johannesburg. Every residence seems to have like a gate, some sort of armed response contractor guarding the residence, or has a watchman or a barbed wire and a huge fence out in front of it. That's something you just cannot ignore when you get here. Even like when I was walking the 20 minutes from the Airbnb to the mall, I didn't really see anybody else like walking on the sidewalk, so I figured on the way back I should probably just do an Uber, and that's what I did. Everybody everywhere will keep telling you about the high crime rates here, and that you should watch out for your electronics and your phones and everything. So I'm definitely going to be vigilant while I'm vlogging here today. But The good thing is that there is great tourism infrastructure here. So that means Airbnb experience is one of my favorite things to do when I travel. And today I will be meeting up with my host soon, who will be guiding me through his neighborhood here in Soweto.
Of Hector Peterson, the boy who was shot and killed in 1976. We also know we have Boyisa Makubu, the guy carrying Hector Peterson. He since disappeared that time and is still missing to this day. And the lady on the side, that's Antoinette Sitole. She was the lady with the group. She was standing with the group there. Yes, she's Hector Peterson's sister. Okay. She's still alive. She's now 63 years old. So they were part of the march that was happening in 1976. So the students of Soweto wanted better education because the government was forcing them now to learn in Afrikaans. You know, Afrikaans is about 90% Dutch. There's a bit of German, French mixed together as well. So they felt like the government was further undermining their education by teaching them in Afrikaans, so they don't become anything. They just continue to remain as laborers in South Africa. So that's because in 1953, the government designed an education system which was known as the Bantu education system. Bantu education simply meaning an education for the black people. So this was a flawed education system designed to keep Africans as laborers and inferiors in South Africa. So the government will spend about 640 rands for the education of a white child. But for a black child, they will spend only 42 rands, you know. So that's how big the gap was. It means that Soweto schools did not have a lot of things. If they couldn't even afford to buy things like textbooks and writing materials, teachers had to sit in classes with more than 50 students and they would have to work in shifts sometimes. You know, it caused a lot of teachers to even quit teaching. One of those teachers is a well-known man, another Nobel Peace Prize winner from this area by the name of the Archbishop Desmond Tutu. He quit teaching that time because of that system of Bantu education, you know. So during the time when the students started to protest, there were no political parties active, but the students were led by the Black Consciousness Movement and the student organizations that were there during that time. So on the 13th of June, 1976, there was a boy by the name of Tsietsi Mashinini. He was the one who went all over South Africa, all over Soweto, He went all over Soweto schools and told them about the march, which was going to happen on the 16th of June. So many of the students did not know about it, but that day when it came, they were surprised and they were told, they saw leaders carrying placards and banners, and they were told to leave assemblies and classrooms and go on the march. So that's when they joined in this march. Almost 20,000 students were supposed to participate in this march. They wanted better education. They wanted Afrikaans to be stopped as a medium of instruction. So they came all the way from Deep Soweto, which is about 5 kilometers away from here. They were walking up until they stopped about 500 meters. That's where you find a school known as Orlando West High School. And next to Orlando West High School, there's Perfeni Secondary School, which was the first school that began teaching in Afrikaans in 1976. So they wanted to show support for the students who were already affected before they go to the Orlando Stadium. So the idea was to get to the Orlando Stadium, have a rally there, and then later on submit the memorandum of grievances to the Minister of Education. But it didn't happen that way because the police came in large numbers. The police were told that the students are causing havoc in Soweto. There was so much violence happening, and the students were stoning people and so on. So they came here carrying shotguns and rifles. Some of the police officers were parked in this area. It used to be just a field with grass and trees, but some of the police went down there near the schools. That's where they went to barricade the roads to stop the students. The commander of the police then ordered the students to disperse and go back to their schools. But he was ordering them in the Afrikaans language, the same language that they were marching against. But the kids then continued to sing and demonstrate. That's when the police decided now to spray tear gas. After 5 minutes, they also released police dogs to attack. Some kids then picked up stones. There were stones everywhere. So it was just gravel that time, you know. So they picked up stones and they stoned the dogs. When 2 dogs died, the police began to shoot with live ammunition, meaning that the life of a dog became more important than that of a black child. And that's when they killed the young boy Hector Peterson, was only 12 years old during that time. So according to the post-mortem, it shows that he was shot somewhere in the upper body. And then after he fell down, the tall guy then also arrived and decided to pick him up, trying to help him to take him to the hospital. In fact, there's a clinic just around the corner here, which is now known as the Mandela Sisulu Clinic. But back in those days, it was called Pumulong Clinic. So that's where he wanted to take the boy. But because he appeared in this photo, the police thought maybe he was one of the leaders or one of the organizers of the march. So the guy then decided to leave South Africa, fearing for his life. He first went to a country known as Botswana. After Botswana, he received a scholarship in Nigeria, but it disappeared somewhere in Lagos, Nigeria. Even to this day, no one knows the whereabouts of that guy. The last time that he communicated with his mother was in 1978, when he was saying that he was in Nigeria but feeling very ill. That was the last time they heard from him. And the girl, Antoinette, she used to work here in the museum, but she resigned in 2014. So the photograph itself became popular. This is the reason why Hector Peterson, the boy, became the symbol of the uprising. He was not the only child who was killed. That day, many people died. In 2 years, thousands of people lost their lives because of what started here in Soweto.
Just met up with our host Sibu here today, and we were just at the Hector Peterson Memorial. It's really, really powerful stuff, especially if you think about how recent all this history is. Like the year 1992 just keeps popping up, and I'm like, that's the year that I was born. So it's like 30 years ago. Only 30 years ago that all this happened.
Yeah.
And if you think about the apartheid era, that was 1952 to 1992.
Yeah.
And that's so recent that people were forced to live in that stratified society where it would be white people at the top, and then it was like basically the skin tone determined where you would rank as a citizen. With whites at the top, and then whiter Asians, and then browner Asians, and then at the bottom you have black people.
That's right.
It's amazing. And you were also telling me that it wasn't until 1992 that black people could actually own the land that they were living on. And so if you think about that and how that impacts generational wealth, and it's like you can't expect people to have any wealth or anything for themselves if they're not able to, or even allowed to legally own their own land.
So even now, the issue of land is a problem.
Yeah.
Because a lot of land was taken those days, and for people to buy the land, it's difficult because they don't have the means, financial means. So South Africa did not do any reparations.
Right.
So it means that even now, people must buy the land, and they don't have the money, and they still remain. A lot of people remain poor and landless.
So there are obviously still going to be a lot of white people now who are wealthy just because they've had land in their family for generations.
Yes,
and that value of that land has grown. And they're sitting on a lot of money right now.
Exactly.
But black families haven't had that same opportunity. They have to start from pretty much nothing in the 1990s. So Sibu made a good point that apartheid isn't what we consider to be like Jim Crow or segregation. It's more akin to slavery than what we had in the US in the early 20th century. And so before that, there was just a union between the Dutch and the British to keep the whites at the top and to consolidate all that power with the Europeans. And so they would work together to ensure that was a legal framework which would pass. But after that, in the late 1940s and early 1950s, it was a completely different system. So apartheid, how did they switch between the system that was before apartheid? How did apartheid come into play suddenly to become so strict?
So during the time of segregation, a lot of white people felt like though the government was being lenient, So the Nationalist Party of South Africa, which was more Afrikaans people or Dutch, they promised the people that when they vote them in, because remember that time black people could not even vote, only whites could vote.
Right.
So they promised their own people that when they vote for them, they're going to make sure that there's more power to the whites, there's more segregation. And that's when they started to make it into law. They made apartheid or segregation a law.
Yeah.
So they created a lot of policies, like I was explaining earlier on, Bantu Education, Group Areas Act, Population Registration Act, the Natives Land, the Immorality Act, whereby people cannot marry other races and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So this happened in the 1950s.
And so that's another example of like when you're privileged, having any sort of equality makes you feel like you're being oppressed.
Yeah.
So that's what the white people were feeling then, is like anything close to equality would mean that they were feeling more oppressed.
Power, yeah.
They're losing power.
Yeah.
And so they banded together and they were like, we need to change that.
Yeah.
And they went to the other extreme.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Now I just finished my tour of the Mandela House. It's amazing. This is where a lot of his family stayed, and he returns to this house following his imprisonment. You can't really take any videos inside, so I couldn't show you anything, but there's some really interesting artifacts. Ready? Yes, I'll come back. I really showed you some really interesting artifacts, especially the one thing that felt really close to home was the letter written by the Michigan State Legislature to the CIA petitioning the U.S. government to apologize for its role. Okay?
We're going to be having some sweet food.
Okay, perfect. The letter from the Michigan State Legislature petitioning the federal government to actually apologize for the CIA's role in detaining Mandela. So you can just see like how history sort of works together in parallels if you think of what was happening in the U.S. around that time and the role that the U.S. government was playing in intervening in the struggle of black people internationally as well. It's disgusting. Just finished up our lunch. We had kota.
Yeah.
We had kota, and it's basically a sandwich that is like a loaf of bread. You can cut off a chunk of the loaf of bread and you get the entire loaf of bread, and then make a hole in the middle, take out the bread, and then you can stuff it with whatever you like. And it's basically just adds everything into it. You don't even have to pick and choose. It's like fries, different kinds of meat, different sauces. It's like just like a burger but on steroids. It's like everything. Burger, it's a hot dog, it's everything all at once. Going on a mini hike. Going on a mini hike here just to go to a local brewery here in Soweto. And then we'll see how it is when we get there. What's really interesting is just how neighborhoods and space has a history here. Especially, huh? This way?
Before we go on, let's stop here.
Yeah. Every vantage point in this neighborhood has a story to tell, and Sibu was telling me these stories. For example, you see the 2010 World Cup stadium, the Orlando Stadium, which hosted the opening ceremony, and that was made to look like the tin roofs of the shanty towns, which overlook the stadium. And then if you keep going, you see all the car dealerships, the Toyota car dealerships, and the BMW car dealership, sure, brought here to Soweto by one of the first black entrepreneurs. His name was Maponya.
Yeah.
Maponya. And Sibu was telling me he also tried to build one of the first malls here in Soweto. However, he faced challenges securing the appropriate funds to build that mall, but eventually he succeeded in 2007.
Yeah.
So he was trying for over 15-20 years to try to build that mall, and even though he succeeded in some of these smaller projects, just because of his race, he had trouble up until the 21st century to build that mall for the people here. And then if you keep going, you get to the residence, this residence which was gifted to the Mandela family by three very unlikely personalities: Gaddafi of Libya, and then Castro of Cuba, and then Jane Fonda from the US. Actually, I don't know how these three personalities got together to really do anything, let alone gift a residence to the Mandela family here in Soweto. It's quite incredible. So as you can expect, there's also a version of redlining, or at least what we would call in the U.S. redlining here. So redlining is something we had in U.S. history,
Okay.
where only certain areas were given to certain races.
Okay.
Only certain races could live in certain parts of the city.
Yeah.
And so obviously the nicer areas of the city would be given to
Yeah.
white only.
Exactly,
And then other areas would be for black or other minorities.
Yeah.
And so it's similar to what we saw up here. You saw all the toxic waste from the mining being dumped right near Soweto.
Yeah.
And they could dump that waste anywhere.
Yeah.
They could dump it somewhere where it's empty land outside of the city,
Yeah.
but they chose to dump it right next to Soweto,
Yeah.
where it leads to issues. And that's something you see in the U.S. too. Like they choose to build a highway to divide different neighborhoods.
Wow.
So also, look at me. I've been out and about all afternoon walking around, but look at me and tell me if there's anything different from how I look now when compared to my Côte d'Ivoire videos. I'll give you a second. Can you tell that I'm not just soaked in sweat? It's been so amazing going out the door and not being just pummeled by that sticky, gross humidity here in Johannesburg. And this is the summer here, so I don't even know. It's amazing. It's pretty cool. They say that that there's a bit of rain here, so that brings in dark clouds and but blocks the sun. And so temperature-wise, it's amazing, and it hasn't rained yet. And humidity-wise, it's like heaven compared to Abidjan. I'm not soaked in my own sweat all day.
Welcome to SOWETO Brewing Company. My name is Julia. So we have 4 types of beers in front of you. We'll start with the red one, which is Shore Ale. It's a flavored beer, 4.5% of alcohol. Then we have number 2. It's April Ale, flavored beer as well, 4.5%. Then we have number 3. It's Master's Brew, the original SOWETO Gold Lager, which is 5.2. Then the last one, it's Orlando Stout, 7%.
Okay. And you've had this brewery has been here, I think you've told me, since 2012?
Yes.
Okay.
And then, Heineken bought it in 2017.
Okay. Is this the only South African beer company, or is it the only one from Soweto? Or?
The SOWETO Gold.
Yeah.
It's the only one from Soweto.
From Soweto, but there's
This is
other
the only
ones.
brewery. But to the SAB that I was telling you about,
Okay.
South African brewery, there are other beers like Black Label,
Oh.
Castle Lager, Hansa, yeah.
Okay.
But this is the one from Soweto.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julia.
All right.
Earlier, Sibu was telling me about the history of brewing here in Soweto. There would be local brewers who would brew the beer in their own homes and sort of like sell it casually to residents of Soweto. And the government, in an effort to try to consolidate all the wealth in the hands of white industrialists, tried to just steal this idea and then package their own very similar beer in an effort to undercut the business of these black brewers. And so we're happy to now have an actual born in Soweto, brewed for all, as their motto says, Soweto Gold beer here. So I will let you know how that goes, and I'll see you after we try out this flight of beers. They're all wonderful colors, so we'll enjoy it for sure. Without me even broaching the topic, Zibu mentioned that he feels really bad for the Palestinian people for undergoing exactly what happened to them here in South Africa in the 20th century, but even now today. And the fact that the US and the UK especially, just as in the 20th century, they did nothing to divest from the apartheid government, but in fact, care more about their businesses and their wealth by supporting the apartheid government. It's the same thing they're doing now with Israel. He also insisted that I visit the Apartheid Museum, which I definitely will be doing in my next 2 days here in Johannesburg. But for now, I think we're probably wrapping up our tour of Soweto. Soweto is such a large area, but we've only really been here in the center looking at Orlando, East, Orlando West, areas where a lot of the history is centered. But it's a township in and of itself, so there's a lot more there, a lot more to see. But I think for our purposes, this about covers it. Sibu mentioned that ever since democracy was won here in South Africa in the 1990s, the country saw black Africans grow their wealth by over 80%. Even though they are the indigenous people of this land and they've been here for way longer than the European settlers, they only grew their wealth in the past like 20, 30 years by 80% just due to democracy. And that makes me think about how we consider our democracy to have started in the late 1700s. But here in South Africa, they're only considering democracy to have been won when all people of all races were allowed to be full citizens with full rights. And that's only like after 1992. That's when they consider that the country has actually become a democracy. So with that in mind, can the U.S. even say that it was a democracy back in the 1700s? I guess in reality, if we apply that same measure, we only really became a democracy maybe in the 1960s, 1970s. Or if you even take a more grand look at democracy, we're probably not even a democracy yet. We just crossed the little bridge here from Orlando West to Orlando East. We're in probably one of the oldest areas of Soweto. And Sibu was telling me that this is actually where Trevor Noah grew up, or at least where he grew up with his mother. And that before his white father, took the family to Johannesburg to attend good middle-class schools in that city. But you can still tell here that every structure tells a story. You can tell that if the structure is made out of corrugated iron, it's probably from like an earlier period when that was all Black Africans were given as their construction materials before they were allowed to use bricks. And now we're going to get into a minivan. We just entered the area of the power towers, and it's just a really popular marketing spot. So we have Soweto Gold taking one of the towers, and then Vodafone taking the other, also using them to kind of communicate messages about social education and social awareness and the like. It's also telling me that this is a popular time for holiday parties, so a lot of companies will start hosting their holiday parties as a popular venue for those events. So you'll see one of those parties behind me. It's also just one of the main landmarks of the Soweto area, and I can see why. They tower over the neighborhood.